So we have our buildings here, they're ready. And while they're all selected, I'm going to hit the M key and move them to the second layer. Okay. I'll now hit Shift A and add mesoplane. I'll hit the Tab key to switch from Object to Edit mode, hit S and 8 to scale it 8 times, and then hit Enter. I'll hit the Tab key to switch from Edit Object mode. And on this plane, we're going to add the particle system, move over to the particle system tab here and click New. For a new particle system, I'm going to change the type from emitter to here. Okay. I'm going to click Advanced. And for this one, I will use a group. I'll select the buildings group, waiting a bit for the viewport to refresh. And I'll bring the number, let's set it from 1000 down to 300. And perhaps, let's leave it at 300. And we have to, first of all we have to use rotation. Let's find it. Okay. And we're going to use the object Y. So we're having our buildings here pointing up. And I'm going to change the size. Let's set it from 0.05 to 0.02. Or perhaps 0.03. And I'll also increase the random size. Let's set it from 0.0 to 0.4. Okay. Now I'm hitting 1 on my numeric keypad and 5 for the front ortho view. And let's take a good look. Now what I'm looking for is for an opening at the buildings here, and as you can see we have a little opening here. So I'm going to hit Ctrl Alt and 0 to roughly position my camera at about here. Okay, right mouse button click to select the camera, and now I'm going to hit Z to grab and move it. Let's move it at about here. Okay, and let's set the X to 0.4 and the Y to -1.4 and the Z to 1.4. And let's bring this one up a bit. Okay, looking good. Now I'm hitting 0 on my numeric keypad for the camera perspective view. And let's create a little animation for us in here. So I'm moving the camera on the Y-axis. Let's move at about the here, and perhaps let's bring it back just a bit. Okay, let's set it to 2.8 on the Y-axis. I'm going to click the right mouse button while the cursor is over the Y value, and I'm going to insert single keyframe to insert the keyframe just for the Y location for the camera. And moving to frame 300. Okay, I'm going to move my camera on the Y-axis. Let's move it back and back. Okay, looking good. Okay, just a bit more, and I think we're good at about here. Let's set it to -11.5. Alright, once more, right mouse button click while the cursor is over the Y, camera location, and insert single keyframe. Okay, now I'm selecting the particle system, right mouse button click to select it, and what I want here is to also render the emitter. It is checked. And for the emitter, I'm going to move to the materials. Let's add the material to this object as well, but I'm going to click this little 12 number here, and I'm creating a unique material for the floor. I'm going to call this one floor, and what I'll do for this one is bring the intensity down. Let's set it down to 0.3. Okay. Now I'll be using a sun lamp. I'm going to change this lamp here into a sun, and it's going to be stronger on the floor. So I'm bringing the material intensity down to make it slightly darker. Okay. Right mouse button click to select the lamp, Alt G and Alt R to clear the position and the rotation for the lamp. I'll hit Z and Z to grab and move it on the Z axis. Let's move it at about here. And what I'll do now is change it to sun. And I'll move over to the lamp properties, the location, rotation and scale for the lamp. Let's rotate it on the x-axis. Let's set the x to -15 or -20. Okay, looking good. And the z, I'm going to set it to 5 or something. Okay, just a slight angle for the sun. Okay, now I'm selecting the camera, right mouse button click to select the camera. Let's locate it. Okay. Now for the camera I'm going to do two things. Moving over to the camera options, I'm going to change the focal length from 35. Let's set it down to 24 and therefore allowing for more stuff to enter the camera frame. And what I'll also do is check limits, and I'll be using some depth of field for this one. Let's move the distance for the depth of field. Let's move it at about 4. I think we're good at about here. And I'll move over to the camera location, rotation and scale. Let's move it a bit closer at -10. Let's see. Okay, I like it better here. Right mouse button click and replace keyframes. Or perhaps let's just replace a single keyframe. Okay. I want only to replace the Y location for the camera. Now moving back to frame 1 and hitting play, let's take a look. And we actually have the camera running through the buildings. Now another thing you have to do for this one, and since we're coming close to the buildings, I'll move over to the camera options, and you have to bring the start clipping down to the minimum value, because you want to be able to see the objects even when you're very close to them. And let's set the end, let's set it to 200, just making sure that we are including our whole scene here in the camera. So I think we're good. What I'll do now is split my 3D view and change the top part to a node editor. Okay. Now I want to render a frame to take a look. And I'll also, before rendering, add some environment lighting. Let's also change the horizon and the zenith color, and checking paper sky and blend sky. I want the horizon to be a strong white color at about here. Okay. And the zenith color to be a strong bluish color. Okay. At about here. Okay, looking good. And we have environment lighting. I'm going to change the white to the sky color. It is set to 1. We might change it later on, and I'll just increase the samples a bit up to 6. Now let's render an image to take a look. And this is what we're getting. Okay. Looking good. Alright. Let's move over to compositing. I'm hitting the escape key while the cursor is over the image to move back to the 3D viewport. Click here for the nodes, and we have the render layers and the composite. Let's move them both to the sides. Hitting the N key to get rid of this little panel here, this little side tab. I'll hit Shift A and add output viewer. Okay. Let's connect the viewer as well, and I'm going to click backdrop. Okay. Now first thing I'll add is, let's hit Shift A and let's add a filter, and let's add a defocus node, connect it, and we'll also use the Z from the render layer to the defocus node, And of course we will uncheck preview and check use Z buffer, because I'm using the actual Z buffer from the scene here. I'm going to turn the maximum blur down to 12, and let's increase the threshold up to 3. Okay, looking good. Now I'll hit Shift A for another node, and I'm going to add filter, glare node. Okay. Now for this one I will let's use a fog glow. Okay. Bring the threshold down so we have the effect here applied on pixels that are not all that bright, and we can see that the effect here kicking in. Okay, looking good at about there. Now I'll hit Shift D to duplicate the glare node. We need another one. And you might want to keep the second fog glow, it creates a stronger effect. But what I'll do is change this one from fog glow to ghosts. Okay. And you can see the ghost effect. I'm going to bring the mix down. Let's set it down. Let's set it down to minus 0.7. I want the original image more than the actual effect. I want the effect to be toned down. And let's set the color modulation down to 0.1. Okay. And let's bring the mix a bit down to 0.8. We just want a slight ghost effect for this one. Now Shift D and move this one to the side. Okay. And I'm going to use a Strakes node, a Strakes glare effect. And for this one I'm going to use 2 Strakes. Okay. And I'm going to set the angle. We're having 2 Strakes here applied horizontally. I'm going to change the angle offset to 90. So we are now having the Strakes here applied vertically. Okay. I think we're good. I'm going to increase the mix for the Strakes. Let's set it to 0. Or perhaps a bit more down. Let's set it to minus 0.4. Okay. What I'm going to do now is hit Shift A and add distort. Let's add lens distortion. Okay. And for this one I'm going to increase the dispersion. Let's set it to 0.1, or perhaps let's set it to 0.05. Okay. And what I'll also add is hit Shift A and let's add color, let's add brightness and contrast. Okay. And I'm going to set the contrast, let's set it up to 2 to see how it looks. Okay, looking good. Let's also bring the brightness down a bit. Let's set it to minus 0.5. Alright. So looking good. Another thing I'll do is add a negative value for the distortion, for the lens distortion node. And I've used this one before. It just adds a slight punch effect to the image. It brings the center of the image a bit like inward, so it looks pretty interesting for a scene that we're using the big focal length for the camera. So this one looks pretty interesting. Let's render another image for you to see. Let's set it at about here and let's hit render. Okay, and this one looks pretty interesting. Now what I'll do for this one, and I think that this one looks a bit too bluish. Oh, of course, you have to make the final output a node and input of the composite node so that the nodes will be applied to the final render. What I'll also do is move over to the world options and let's set the zenith color. Let's bring it closer to white. Okay. Alright, and I think we're good at about there, and bring the horizon color up. Alright, and I think we're good there. Let's render an image. And as you can see, this one also renders pretty fast. We're having some noise by the ambient occlusion here, but if you want, you might increase the samples here, or you might leave it as it is. It's a slight noise and it doesn't really affect the scene. So I'm going to render an animation for you guys to see. This is it. Let's save the file. Let's save it as Blender buildings, and I think we're good. So this is Dimitris Christou, and thanks for watching.